Thank you, Cassandra. I want to welcome everyone back after our August summer vacation. As a reminder, the NOAA EBFM seminar series began all the way back in November 2017 with the main objective of increasing and emphasizing the value of ecosystem based management approaches for the sustainability of our ecosystems. The seminar does this by showcasing excellent science and management initiatives being undertaken by NOAA as well as our close collaborating partners. And so, with that, today we are showcasing the work of Dr. Eric Wade, an assistant professor in the Department of Marine, Earth, and Atmospheric Sciences at North Carolina State University. His primary expertise is studying human environment interactions within coastal and marine systems. His research focuses on understanding the factors influencing individual as well as collective decision making in response to socio-ecological changes. Dr. Wade's work also examines how formal and informal institutions influence the behaviors and decisions of stakeholders within coastal as well as marine environments. His research areas include fisheries governance and management, marine spatial planning, community well-being, and the social dimensions of marine energy. So I want to thank Eric Wade for being our presenter today, especially as he kicks off his new academic year at NC State. So with that, Eric, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. Yeah, so thank you. It's great to be a part of the seminar series. And I'm hoping that this presentation will be able to spark some conversation around the social dimensions of ecosystem-based management. And so some of you, so you may have been, you saw the flyer about today's talk. And so the goal for the next few minutes is to talk about stakeholder involvement in ocean governance and what that looks like. And so we really want to take some time to think about those social and political factors and how those contribute to stakeholder involvement in ocean governance. And so as we get started, if you allow me a few minutes, just to acknowledge some of the collaborators and funders for this project, for the projects that I'll talk about. And so this spans both federal as well as state level agencies here in North Carolina, as well as a diversity of undergrad and graduate and grad students in my research group. And so as we get started, right, this idea of ocean governance is this multidimensional concept, multidimensional construct that operates at multiple different scales with multiple different actors, institutions that interact with each other. But there's still I think this confusion on what this actually looks like in practice, right? And so this image, I think, tries to get at the diversity of ways that folks interact and think about ocean governance. But I think a central question that I think at least comes up for me is how do we think about participation and engagement with stakeholders within this atmosphere, right? Given the diversity, given the different ways that it could look. And so that remains what has been classified as this wicked problem in ocean and coastal governance. And importantly, what we have noticed is that efforts to guide participation has largely fallen short. And we think that has happened because of entrenched power imbalances, long-standing conflicts with stakeholder groups. And what I will talk about today is this mismatch in how we design and think about engagement for stakeholders. And so, despite this growing attention that we should be considering the human dimensions of ocean governance, of ecosystem based management, there's been few studies that have really, I think, looked at those social and cognitive factors and those political factors that drive participation. And so, as we think about participation and engagement, right there has been what I think about as a normative approach to participation. There's a table, there's a group of folks around a table that is talking about some policy or some new project or some new initiative, right? This is what we picture. This could be happening across multiple different agencies. And so, what folks have said is that this table currently is not representative of the folks who should be at the table. It does not include diverse knowledge. It does not include folks whose livelihoods are affected. And so some folks have suggested that, hey, we need to make this table more inclusive. And to do that, they suggest that someone needs to get up and leave the table to make room for someone else at the table, right? So we've heard this analogy, we've heard this before. We've also heard that we should simply build a bigger table, right? That's what we need, is a bigger table, so that there is room for all of us at the table for us to discuss these important matters. But something that one of my undergrad students mentioned is that, hey, why don't we just have more tables? That seems to be the solution. Rather than developing or building a bigger table, maybe we should just have more tables so that more folks can participate in decision making and management. And so, despite what you think about these approaches to engagement and management, engagement and participation, I think centrally it is how. Once we have folks at the table, it's how we engage and participate with them, right? Getting them to the table is it's one part of the solution, but there's also the matter of engagement. And historically, what we have found is that engagement has typically adopted this deficit model that you're seeing on your screen, where we assume that as scientists and as experts, as policymakers, we're the only one with information, and we're the only one that has knowledge of the system. And we typically take this fire hose effect to just share it all with communities or with society, because we think that they have this deficit and they don't understand what is happening in their communities or in their coastal ecosystem. But what I think there's been some advocacy for this dialogue approach, which recognizes that different groups, different stakeholders possess different types of knowledge, and their interaction with the system is different, and that brings with it some value to how we think about the human dimensions of ecosystem-based management, how we think about the participation and engagement within this sector. And so that is this idea, this dialogue model is what we will try to break apart today. But I think one of the key questions is, what does this mean for ecosystem-based management? And for many of you in the room, this is largely apparent and very clear for you. But just to underscore here is that when we think about this link to ecosystem-based management, one, there is a diversity of factors and both existing as well as emerging interactions that is affecting how we think about ecosystem-based management, right? And this complicates this idea of this using just this one-size-fits-all approach, which is never good. And so because the ecosystem-based management approach is built, I think, on a recognition of the importance of adaptive management, it's important for us to also adapt how we think about engagement and participation in these spaces, and not use the same approach that worked in existing sectors, existing conceptualization of ocean space, but also to think about what that means for emerging ideas. And so I think for us, I think at least for me, right, ecosystem-based management, it is inherent in that the human dimensions is inherent and implicit in that for me. But I think there's still some work that we can do to really break that apart a little bit more. And so, just to drive that point home, one, I think as we think about engagement, right, recognizing that stakeholders are not a monolithic group, and therefore the ways we engage and the strategies that we use to encourage participation needs to reflect the diversity of those stakeholders as well. And by doing that, that underscores the need for us to think about engagement as this ongoing process, right? Participation is this ongoing process and not a one time just checkbox approach, but it should move as community perspectives move, as we have new ideas and new projects. We should continually go back for permission and for engagement. And we've talked about this third point about not assuming or using a deficit approach, but also thinking about how we design engagement approaches that matches the values and knowledge systems of our communities and our stakeholders. And it is only by doing that that we will be able to build legitimacy and trust with our communities. And so if you don't take away anything else that I say for the rest of today's talk, that is what I hope that you will take away, right? That are strategies for engaging the human dimensions and for engaging with stakeholders must be aligned with their knowledge. It must be aligned with their values for it to be perceived as legitimate. But as I hinted at earlier, how this looks in emerging as well as existing ocean sectors will be very different. And so we'll talk about two case studies today. The first with North Carolina's fisheries management system, and then a second on marine energy introduction. And so here in North Carolina, the fisheries management system and ecosystem is a highly contentious one, right? That has been marked by conflict across sectors, both commercial and recreational, but also from residents as well. And so, on one hand, you have our commercial fishers who think that the recreational fishers simply do not care about the fact that they depend on this resource for their livelihoods, right? And on the other hand, we have our recreational fishers who think that commercial fishers are simply indiscriminate in their catch, right? They're just doing whatever they want and they do not respect the system. They have no respect for the water quality or the marine life, right? And so there's this contention between these two signature groups of the fisheries management system in North Carolina. And then, as we think about marine energy introduction, this is a new and emerging sector for us here in North Carolina. And so, at the currently, marine energy technology is only being tested in our state, and there's to date to the date of this presentation, there's been no commercial scale projects implemented in this state. But I think there still is momentum to develop marine energy in the state, right? And so, but it's important as we think about the introduction of marine energy to also think about the need to understand communities' perspective, understand communities' knowledge, so that we are better able to align this emerging sector with folks' interpretation of the coastal system. And so first, I'll start on the fisheries side, since that is the side that I think about a lot. We'll start with the fisheries side here in North Carolina. And so this study was focused only on state-managed waters in North Carolina and did not cover any of the federal waters. So we look only at those areas that are shaded in gray on your screen. Those are the areas that we focused on. And so that's all our inland water, not inland but estuaries, as well as those state-managed waters. And so, if you may not know, fisheries is historically a part of the fabric here for many North Carolina coastal communities, and it has contributed significantly to our state's economy. But that contribution has been dwindling over the past few years, with multiple different narratives for why that is. And so, recognizing this decline in fisheries in the state of North Carolina, the Department of Marine Fisheries and our state government have been trying multiple different strategies to engage with the community. And when I say community here, I'm talking about commercial and recreational fishers. And so there's this myriad of choices, right, that they have tried to employ: advisory meetings, workshops, public comments, periods, surveys, and online meetings, right, to try and get engagement to come up. And so engagement was low pre-COVID, it dipped during COVID, and it has continued to decline. And the question that continues to arise in our conversations is why that is, right? Why are folks not engaging in those conversations? But I think it's important to recognize that creating a mechanism for participation is one part of the equation, but making it work in the long term is another part of that equation. And so, getting those two to work together, I think, is continues to be this wicked problem, as Gentaf and Chu and Packley talked about, right? So, getting those to work is difficult. So we were trying to look at, for this project, right, how do levels of participation vary across stakeholder groups and their participation in decision making processes. And secondly, what were the factors that drive participation in decision making? So those are the central questions, and those are the questions that I'll focus on for the first portion of today's presentation. And so to answer these questions, we use a survey instrument across the state, and I'll talk about our sampling in a little while. But we use a mix of multiple choice and matrix questions, as you're seeing here today, to get an understanding of how frequent they participated, what activities they participated in, why they did not participate, looking at levels of trust in agencies, and looking at fishing dynamics and some demographic factors as well. So, in addition to these questions, we also had some writing responses, which were impassioned and long and covered a diversity of topics about one, the legitimacy of our instrument, the legitimacy of my team to conduct this work, the legitimacy of the General Assembly to even start to do this work. And so we had a diversity of writing responses, which helped us to contextualize a lot of the work that we have had. And talking about impassioned responses, there I also received letters at my office, at my previous institution, about this work and why. And challenging the work, but also providing insights to help build the picture out a little bit more. And so we've received a diversity of responses, both what we expected and also what we did not expect as well. And so this was our survey response. We had about our sample size for our commercial fishers. So we sampled the full population of commercial fishers, which is about just over 2,000 fishers. We did a random sample of recreational fishers. There are, I think, over 1 million registered recreational fishers in the state of North Carolina. We did a random sample of 2,000 to match our commercial fishers. And we also did a survey of residents in North Carolina of about almost 3,500 residents. For the purposes of this presentation, though, I will not focus too much on the residents for today, but I'm happy to talk more about it offline. And so, what we saw, right, thinking about the first thing that we were interested in is participation, right? And what we found was that commercial fishers participated in decision making more often than recreational fishers did. And this was across the board and across all opportunities for participation. We were seeing that commercial fishers statistically significantly participated in decision making more often than recreational fishers did. And so this was one part of the puzzle, right? Who participated more? The second part is what discouraged you from participation. And for our commercial fishers, what you're seeing here is that the main reason why commercial fishers do not participate or are discouraged from participating is that they were frustrated in the management process, right? That was the most on average, that's what fishers selected most often. On the flip side, we see that our commercial fishers, the reason that they were discouraged from participating is they were not knowledgeable about fisheries issues, and they also had no interest in participating in these decision making processes. Right. So we're seeing this is our first glimpse of the distance between our commercial and recreational fishers. On one hand, commercial fishers are saying, "Hey, I'm frustrated with this process, but also these meetings are inconvenient. The opportunities to participate, those are inconvenient." On the other hand, for commercial fishers, we're seeing, "Hey, I'm not knowledgeable about these issues. I'm also not interested in participating in these issues." And a small percentage of them are satisfied with the current regulations. Thinking about trust in these management agencies now, what we're seeing here, this tries to get at the spectrum of trust across the different types of groups. And so before this presentation, there is also a trust in federal government that I forgot to to include here. But what you're seeing overall is that commercial fishers are less trusted. So commercial fishers are in the dark blue solid circle. And so what we're seeing is that they are less trusting across the board of management entities. But there was this range that we saw in trust for the Division of Marine Fisheries, which is our state level agency that manages fisheries in the state. But overall, we see that recreational fishers, sorry, were more on the neutral side, but less trust in state officials compared to the Marine Fisheries Commission and the Department of Marine Fisheries. But we did take it to be some positive in terms of the trust for scientists here. So now we've looked at what discouraged participation, we've looked at trust, we've also looked at differences in participation across the groups. And now we want to look at what contributes to the frequency of participation, right? So what are those factors that contributes to frequency in participation? And so these were the factors that we included in our model. And so if you'll have to excuse the clip art model that I tried to make, but this was the best representation I could come up with here. So these are the factors that we looked at in our model to look at how these factors contributed to frequency of participation in decision making. And as a reminder, commercial fishers participated more than recreational fishers. And so we looked at a range of demographics, we looked at fishing dynamics, we also looked at some at understanding of management agencies, trust in management agencies, fishing organization membership, and investment in fishing. And so what we've seen here now on the commercial fisheries side, we're seeing that females participated more often in decision making, increased gear heterogeneity. So the more gears you have, the more likely you are to participate. Understanding of management agencies. So the more knowledge or your perceived understanding of management entities meant you are more likely to participate in decision making. And then last, if you are a member of a fishing organization or fishing association, you are more likely to participate in decision making processes. Now, keeping that in mind, on the recreational fisher side, we're seeing this. I don't know if you can call it a flip, maybe it is, but what you're seeing here, income was negatively associated with participation in decision making. And so, what that means is that the higher your income, the less likely you were to participate in decision making processes. And so, again, keep in mind this is for recreational fishers only. And then similar to our commercial fishers, if you understood the management entities and the reason for them and what they did, you are more likely to participate in decision making activities. And so as we pull those findings together, one, I think what we're seeing was that participation was low across both groups, right? But despite that, they had folks had different reasons for participation and why they wanted to participate, and the drivers behind why they participated was also different across those groups. Um, but I think something that for commercial fishers, being a part of a fishing organization positively correlated to them participating in management decisions. I will add a caveat for that third point, though, to just as a disclaimer that not oftentimes, but sometimes, membership, fishing group organization, there may be some voices in those organizations that may not be listened to, and so we want to interpret that finding very, very carefully. That not all members may agree with decisions of those fishing associations. And then lastly, the only consistent predictor or contributor to participation in decision making was understanding of management agencies, right? And so if you understood management agencies, you were more likely to participate in decision making. But another caveat here for you is that overall, both on the recreational and the commercial side, both groups had very little understanding of these management agencies. So while it was a strong contributor of participation, both groups had very low understanding of those management entities. And so, to assess that understanding of management entities, we ask a series of true and false questions. So, similar to a quiz that you get in a classroom. But I think few. So this is a typo here on your screen. Sorry, but few fishers agree that managers listen to their input, right? So most fishers, so it should say most fishers agree that managers don't listen to my input. So, and this was one of the key factors from our qualitative interviews that discouraged folks from participating, is that they do not feel that managers were listening to them, and therefore they did not see a need to participate in those processes because they were not going to be listened to, even if they participated. And so now, keeping this in mind, right? This is for an existing sector, right? These are existing sector with entrenched here in North Carolina, with entrenched differences across those two groups. And now I want to switch to marine energy introduction, which is a completely new sector that adds some uncertainty to how we think about ocean governance and ecosystem-based management. And so, as a disclaimer, despite the image that you're seeing on your screen, when we talk about marine energy, or when my research group talks about marine energy, we actually don't include wind turbines. And I'll show you some pictures of the actual devices that we study, but we don't include offshore wind when we think about marine energy introduction. So ignore that image on your screen. And so when we think about marine energy, a lot of what we're thinking of, a lot of the ideas around marine energy is this idea of not in my backyard syndrome, right? This is what has been driving a lot of the conversations. I think in the past, I think we're moving away from it. But this is a lot of what has been driving those conversations. This idea of not in my backyard syndrome. And that in my backyard syndrome is simply this idea in a very condensed approach from our colleagues. From This is pulled from our colleagues at Oregon State University. This idea that people will oppose renewable energy projects based out of ignorance, irrationality, or just selfish protection. This could be of their identity, but also of their home. So this driving idea. This was the driving idea behind to try and explain why people would reject marine energy introduction. However, this lacks nuance, right? It makes a lot of assumptions and it treats people as a monolith, right? And so, if you go back to the start of my presentation, I told you to first build legitimacy. Strategies must align with the values and knowledge of our stakeholders. And so, this idea of NIMBYism is devoid of that, right? It treats everyone that, hey, these folks are rejecting because of ignorance and irrationality, but does not consider other factors. And so, like I said, so for us in my group, marine energy, we do not work on wind and offshore wind or even terrestrial wind. We work on energy that is generated from waves, tides, and currents, right? So those are the devices that we work with. You're seeing a few examples of the devices that we work with. I don't work with the devices. I simply study people's reaction to the devices in their spaces. Right? They're very smart people who build these devices, and so there's a range of devices and different types. Right? And so, as you may hypothesize, each device, based on its design, its operation, its end use, will generate different reactions from communities. So these are different technologies that were tested at the Coastal Studies Institute testing site in Jeanette's Pier on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And so we were interested. So for this project, we are interested in looking at the role of not this idea of not in my backyard syndrome and shaping how stakeholders perceive and their acceptance or resistance to marine energy introduction. And so, what were the factors that contribute to this, to whether or not they accept or reject it? We looked at this idea of knowledge and their perceptions, and also identifying divergences and convergence between residents and visitors' perceptions of marine energy introduction. And so we also did, and so these were the three samples for this study. One was a statewide questionnaire for about 2,000 people across the state of North Carolina. The second was just a survey with counties in North Carolina. These coastal counties are defined by the state, and then lastly, we did a intercept survey with visitors to the Outer Banks. And so these are some of the measures that we ask in our questionnaire. I'm happy to talk offline about these ideas if folks are interested. But this is just a quick summary. We asked about support, perceptions, knowledge, ocean values, foundational values, place values, demographic information. And so this is a condensed form. All of these are constructs, right? So we ask multiple questions to get a support, multiple questions to get a perceptions, and the list goes on. And so first, we wanted to know how familiar people are with marine energy, right? That's the central question, and a lot of that was very important for the state, right? How familiar folks are. And so, what we have noticed, or what we found in our study, was that overall, folks were generally familiar with renewable energy in the state of North Carolina, with folks in the coastal counties having more familiarity with renewable energy than the other two groups. But what we found was that, in general, folks had no idea about marine energy. Their familiarity with marine energy was very low, and this was a self-reported familiarity. Right? We did not, in comparison to the quiz that we asked for our fishers, this for the survey, this was a self-reported familiarity, and so groups had very little. Familiarity with marine energy, and overall, it was very low. Right? This is something that we expected. Marine energy is still in the testing phase. We did not expect folks to have high familiarity or high knowledge of this. Right? A lot of these are simply tested in our waters for a couple of days. We then asked folks, should we develop marine energy in the state of North Carolina versus in the United States? And so I'll go back just a step to say that when we gave them the survey, we provided a definition of marine energy so that we were all on the same page, right? Marine energy refers to the extraction of energy from waves, currents, or tides. It does not include offshore wind in this. So we were very explicit with that statement in the survey so that we were able to frame folks' mind when they were completing the survey. And so when we looked at the need to develop marine energy in North Carolina, so what we found was that coastal county residents and statewide and North Carolina residents expressed less agreement with the need for us to develop marine energy both in North Carolina and in the United States. In comparison, what you're seeing on your screen, right, is that folks who are visitors to the Outer Banks, they were more likely to support the development of marine energy, both in the United States but also in North Carolina. And that scale on the left, 1 is we do not agree, and 5 is strongly agree. So now we see that folks have very little familiarity, but there's still some agreement, right? That we need to develop marine energy. Despite this lack of familiarity, there was still some agreement for its development. And now, building on that, we wanted to figure out what are the drivers behind marine energy development that we just saw on the slide before. And so these were just the factors that I showed you in that table earlier. These were those factors pulled out a little bit more. In our model, we had expected outcomes, we had some demographics, we had knowledge and awareness of marine energy, we had some foundational values, and we also had some ocean values in there. And so this, the first set of results that you will see are from a statewide survey of North Carolina residents, right? So the first part, should we develop marine energy in the state of North Carolina? This is according to should we develop marine energy in the state of North Carolina? So for residents, what we're seeing, all the constructs in blue are positive relationships. All the constructs in orange or red represent negative relationships. So if you perceive there to be benefits from marine energy, you are more likely to support it. Older folks were more likely to support it. More conservative individuals were less likely to support marine energy. If you perceive risk, you are less likely to support marine energy. If you held transcendent values, right? This is welfare for others, your care for others, and interest in others, you are more likely to support marine energy. On the ocean value side, if you had this appreciation and this view of and this consumptive view of the ocean, right? We should use the ocean, we should leverage it for its power. You are more likely to support marine energy introduction. But on the flip side, if you view the ocean from a symbolic, you had a symbolic view of the ocean for either religious or cultural or personal reasons, you were less likely to support the introduction of marine energy. So this is North Carolina. This is the factors that contribute to North Carolina residents' support for marine energy introduction in the state. At the state level now, at the national level now, we're seeing similar trends, but some stuff dropped out and some stuff are now in. The new stuff that you're seeing, one, gender, so females were more likely to support marine energy introduction and males were less likely to support it. We also saw that folks who had higher income were more likely to support marine energy introduction. And so, in comparison to development of marine energy in the state, at the federal level, we see that the foundational values no longer played a role, right? So, self transcendent dropped out here. And now we wanted to look at whether or not there's a difference for our statewide resident, for our coastal residents, right? So that first part of the study that we just showed you was from the statewide survey, right? We had some mix of demographic variables. We had expected outcomes, which was strong. We had some foundational values, and we also had some ocean values in there. And those were the things that were contributing to statewide residents' support for marine energy introduction at both the state level and the national level. And other coastal counties now, we're seeing a bit of a different story here. One, the expected outcomes of marine energy continues to be a driving force in folks' support for marine energy development. But we also see foundational values start to reappear here. Self-transcendent is now has a negative relationship to support for marine energy development. So as self-transcendent decreases, support increases, right? So there's this opposite relationship, and self-enhancement now has a positive relationship here. And we see the same thing happening. So the first one was in North Carolina. So whether or not what are the factors that will influence coastal communities' support for marine energy development in the state? So these were our four values. At the federal level, it was still those the same four factors drove the model, right? So we're not seeing a difference here. And what we found most interesting from these results, especially for the coastal communities, one was that ocean values did not play a significant role at all. And so we ran these tests in multiple different iterations just to try and see if we were seeing what it is we were seeing. And this was right. So ocean values did not play a significant role. Place attachment, right? Place attachment refers to your connection to place, right? Your dependence on that place for your well-being or for your livelihoods. We also saw that that did not play a significant role, both for our coastal communities, but also for our North Carolina residents. We hypothesized that place attachment would play a role in how in whether or not in driving coastal communities' support for marine energy. With that did not play a role here, right? And so that serves to challenge this idea that people are simply rejecting marine energy development or whatever technology development or initiatives in their space simply out of selfish protection. So our findings did not support that idea. And so, as we wrap up this second study, what we found was that the level of support for marine energy is generally positive across both our statewide survey and our coastal survey, but familiarity was still low, right? So, interpret that support with the idea that familiarity of with marine energy was still very low. And so there were some differences in terms of the drivers of support at the statewide level and at the coast for statewide residents and for coastal residents. Importantly, just as a note here, there was not any cross pollination across our different groups, right? So you could, if you completed one part, you did not complete the other part. If you completed the statewide residents survey, you did not complete the coastal residents survey. And so, lastly, as I just mentioned, while familiarity and knowledge were generally low, we think that our this work is challenging the idea that NIMBYism, especially in the form of ignorance and selfish protection alone, does not influence support. But there are other factors that were influencing support. It was those ideas of these expected outcomes. What were your perceived outcomes of marine energy? And that is what was tried. That was a consistent driver of support across both our groups and across the scale of marine energy introduction, both at the state level but also at the federal level. And so similar, and we saw foundational values being a driver, a significant driver of support as well, support for the introduction of marine energy as well. And so as we wrap up, I think this is my last slide. So as we wrap up, as we pull these ideas together, right, current participation and how we think about participation in ocean governance, in ecosystem-based management, is likely not representative of large stakeholder groups. What I have tried to demonstrate is that there's significant nuance even within groups and across groups, right? And so as we think about how we engage and participate with those communities and stakeholders, we want to be careful and include the caveat that is not likely not representative of the larger group. But to be able to overcome that, right? Thinking about the challenge of, hey, participation is one part of the equation, but how to do that good and how to do that well and how to get that done is another part, and get that to be long lasting is another part of the equation. And that requires some reorganization and requires institutional shifts in how we think about the role of stakeholders and the role of communities, and moving away from a top-down approach that treats communities simply as the receiving end of this fire hose effect, but rather to treat them as part of this dialogue approach. And to do that, that requires some tailoring of information that matches the values, the knowledge of our stakeholders, right? It needs to align with the context that stakeholders operate in. And it is only through that alignment that we're able to understand, to match those initiatives with the benefits that communities want or need from the ocean or from their systems. And based on the importance of values across our studies and across the fisheries study and across the marine energy study, one is an existing infrastructure in existing sector, one is an emerging sector. We think that a value-based approach, right, to stakeholder engagement is key to be able to address in how we form these arrangements, right? That is what we think will build legitimacy. And a values-based approach here, a value-based approach to stakeholder engagement simply means that it needs to be tailored, right? Engagement needs to be framed around those values because those values are central to how people perceive and understand introductions in their space, and that is those we think that those are the values that are driving their decisions to support, to accept, resist, or to cope with introductions in their spaces, right? And so leveraging a value-based approach is key here. And that is not an easy task. It's a task that takes quite a bit of time, but I think the benefits of it, I think, it is outweighs the costs of doing it, and the long standing the relationships that need to be built around it. And so with that, with that, I thank you so much again for the invitation to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing here in North Carolina around stakeholder participation and engagement in ocean governance, but also applying that and thinking about how we can draw parallels to the work that y'all are doing with ecosystem-based management, right? Thinking about the complex infrastructure, the complex environment within which ecosystem-based management operates, and that it is growing with complexity and uncertainty over time. And so, with that, thank you so much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
We have already had some questions come in, so we'll dive right into it. Our first question: when fishers say they weren't listened to, is it possible that they're being heard, but management decisions don't go the way they want, and that it appears to them as not being heard?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think yes. So one, it could be that the way that they expect the decision to go based on their feedback, it did not go the way they want, and so they perceive that as not being heard. So I think that is valid, and we see that happening. At the same time, I think one way to get around that we have proposed is to be able to demonstrate to fishers and to communities how their comments are being integrated into the decision making process, right? And so we heard from a lot of communities, hey, we went to these meetings, we submitted comments, or we wrote in comments, but no one followed up to share if these comments were integrated, if they were integrated, where they were integrated in the process. If they were not integrated, tell us why they were not integrated. And so I think it's important to look at both sides, right? If they were, tell us where they were. If they were not, tell us why they were not. Yeah, so that's an excellent question. Thank you.
Our next question: what's in it for people to participate in a management process or even a research project like these? I think as a social scientist, we need to think about what we ask of research participants and legitimately what is in it for them.
Right. Yeah. So that's a great question, and I think we think about it often, or I think about it a lot. And as you said, as social scientists, we think about that question a lot. And so for us, how we frame this idea of participation in management processes, I'll talk about the management process more. One is that these decisions impact your livelihoods, and that's how we have tried to encourage participation in the research, but also in management. Is that your participation in these processes provides some insight to policymakers. And so for the fisheries study, this was a study that was required or commissioned by the General Assembly. And so this will result in a report that goes directly to the folks who make these significant decisions. And so and so that goes back to this values framing participation as a connection to your livelihood, to your well-being, I think is significant, a significant way to get buy-in and why they should participate. In terms of research, I think it's the same thing, right? You are helping us to understand and break apart these dynamics. There are a lot of assumptions that we make as researchers and as managers, and so as a stakeholder, I think it's key for you to help us to quell those assumptions about how we think you operate. And I think that's an important point in terms of how we get folks to participate more in these processes.
Awesome. Thank you for your response. Our next question: Federal fisheries management in the US is highly participatory to the point where it can bog down adaptive approaches. Can you speak to some of the pitfalls if participatory processes and how to navigate them effectively?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, and also something we talked about quite a bit, right? So you can see here in North Carolina, there's a myriad of approaches. At the federal level, there's also more ways to participate. And I think the way to be able to do that, I don't know if I have the magic wand. I wish I would. I wish I had. But I think one is to streamline those approaches to match the stakeholders that you're going for, right? So not all approaches will be appropriate for all stakeholders, and I think that's something that we often try to do. Is that, hey, we have 100 approaches. Let's just throw all of the approaches out to see which one sticks. And I don't think that's the best approach to go for participatory processes. Hey, let's just try all of them. I think it's important to figure out which ones work best and which ones are working best, and then leverage those that are working best, rather than just saying, let's use all of them, right? Because I think it's common knowledge that some participatory approaches are simply don't work, right? And so we're only doing them because we think that they work, or we want to provide that option. But if they're not working, then let's not use them. Let's align participatory processes with the ways how people want to participate, and not the way how we want them to participate. And that requires going to communities, or going to our stakeholders and asking them, what are ways that you want to participate, and using that instead of just saying, hey, here's a million way. And that, as you mentioned, Abigail, that just bogs down the process quite a bit. Not quite a bit, but a lot.
Thank you. Our next question, you mentioned that understanding management entities was a consistent predictor of participation. Can you specify what about management entities stakeholders need to understand?
Yeah, that's a great question, Samara. And I think what we found was they didn't first, and this is in North Carolina, right? So they didn't understand the role of those agencies. Like, what were they supposed to do? And so I'll provide an example of our Marine Fisheries Commission. Many folks had no idea what the role of those commissions, what the role of the commission was, right? Do they pass regulations? Do they enforce? So they really didn't understand the main goal of those organizations, and so that was what we were finding, was that they didn't know why these organizations existed, and so similarly, so we asked a few questions about, does this organization do enforcement? Do they pass regulations? Do they collect license fee? And so overall, they were unclear about regulations. They were unclear about those operational dynamics, right? So what is it that this organization does do specifically on a day-to-day management? So that they could not figure out that link. But I think we or not question, but think about how could we get around that idea? And is it could we have asked this in a different way? And so I think there's still some things we can do around that question of understanding of management entities, and what specifically they're not understanding. But what we have found is that it was just the rules, broadly the rule of those management entities. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And then our next question that we have, any thoughts on the use of the term stakeholder rather than other terms such as interest holder or publics, especially given the legacy of the term stakeholder?
Yes, so I'm happy. I'm happy to have a deeper conversation about stakeholder offline in North Carolina. That is an interesting word to use. So I'm happy to talk about that more offline. But what I will say is that in the survey, for especially the fisheries survey, we did not mention the word stakeholder at all. Because we had preliminary conversations with management, with fishers, with different with different community members, and they cautioned us against using the word stakeholder in any of the survey that we conducted. And so what you are seeing is how we have. Not how I have presented it, but in all of the work, we took out stakeholder, because that's not a at least on the fisheries side, that was not a word um, um, that communities wanted to be able to use. But I think there are more. There are better words that we can use. I think actors was one of those words that came up in discussion with using actors, interested parties. So I think that there are ways that we can get around not using stakeholders, right? And again, this aligns with this idea of matching word choice and framing with who our audience will be. Yeah, so that's an excellent question. I'm happy to talk more about that.
Great. Thank you so much. Our next question, can you elaborate on frustration as a key participatory deterrent?
Yeah, excellent question, Samara. So for many of for a lot of our fishers, both qualitatively and quantitatively from the survey, they were frustrated with the process. Right? They did not feel as if though the process was equitable. They did not feel as though the process was fair, and that goes back to the idea that they did not know where. What was the benefit of participating, and that causes frustration. Hey, I've been participating, I've been coming to meetings, I've been writing comments, and I have no idea where that goes, and that caused this frustration and this lack of trust in management entities and in management agencies that leads to this frustration. And so because of that, they don't want to participate. And so I think I read a paper that frustration can either lead to participation or lead to participation, or it can hinder participation. But in our case, frustration in the process and how the process was set up and designed led to a lack of participation.
On the third and fourth bullets, are you saying that we need to give people what they want to hear so we can increase engagement?
No, I don't. That's not what I'm saying. I think it is how we frame that information, right? And how we frame the message. The message could be negative, but it's how we frame that message. So we want to frame it around things that are important for people, and that things that they can connect with. So simply framing engagement as, hey, you need to engage. You need to engage because it is important to you. That is devoid of any connection to what they may find as important, right? It's so you cannot simply just provide information to people because we have studies that prove that that does not work by simply providing information. It is whether that information aligns with how they think about the world and what they find as important. That is how you want to. That is how you want to. That is how you want to frame information. So it's not telling them, hey, this is telling them what they want to know, but really to ensure that we're aligning those ideas with their ways of knowing, not with their ways of thinking and how they see the world. I think that is more central than simply just telling them what they want to hear. Because Tomas, I think that will not work for them, and it will not work for us in the long term.
Thank you for sharing your work with us today. This was really great to hear about. And thank you, Corinne, for organizing today's event. Corinne, do you have any final remarks?
Just a couple. I also want to thank Dr. Eric Wade again for not only an extremely interesting research, but also an incredibly important topic, as we can see by all the engagement from the audience. So I really appreciate that. As a reminder, the EBM EBFM seminar series takes place on the second Wednesday of each month. So our next seminar will be on Wednesday, October 8th. Mark your calendars. We will be hosting Dr. Susanna Blake, an environmental anthropologist from the Southeast Fisheries Science Center here at NOAA. Hope to see you guys next month.
Great. Thank you so much. And yes, audience, we hope to see you then. Thank you for attending and enjoy the rest of your day.